And welcome to the Football Hipsters podcast in partnership with classicfootballshirts.co.uk. Whether you're a full hipster or classic collector, they have something for you. It is March 2017, late March, no less, and it is one of those fun international breaks. Maybe less emphasis on the word fun, I would have to say. But we are here to hopefully get you through the dullness that is international football. And we're going to talk a little bit about the EFL. That includes, of course, the Championship Leagues 1 and 2, and we might even be able to throw in a little bit of the leagues below that if we get time. So, without further ado, whatever you prefer, let's introduce my two guests. You might have guessed who I've got with me tonight. I've got Ross and I've got Josh. Good evening to you both.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Right, gentlemen. So we're just going to sort of preempt the listeners and say that this is just going to be an informal chat. We're just going to highlight a few clubs, talk about a few stories, pick out a few bits and bobs, and just have a general roundtable type of discussion. So hopefully you all enjoy. So let's start with the Championship then, Ross's favourite playground. I think it's fair to say, Ross, I've managed to talk you into a little bit of French football this year. You've managed to talk me into a bit of Championship football this year. I'm very much enjoying it. So shall we sort of start at the top? And rather than go through every team, we're going to kind of cherry pick and just sort of batch teams together a little bit. So I think it's fair to say we've got a two-horse title race. Naturally, I'm going to ask Josh about Brighton. But let's start with Newcastle with you. Their form of late, last three games in particular, draw, loss, draw, little bit patchy, but as we sit here tonight, 38 games played, they're top of the table with 78 points. Is there any sort of position you can see them falling into that doesn't mean they go up automatically? And have you been impressed with them overall this season? Any star performers or players you particularly have enjoyed watching?
I can't see them not going up automatically at this stage. I think the only club that are in danger of not going up automatically are Brighton. Newcastle, it's strange to me that we're sat in a position now where we're waiting for the last block of games, the last 8 games to come on after the international break. It seems strange to me that we're in a position where Newcastle are only a point ahead of Brighton in first, because a couple of weeks ago they had that double win over Brighton and Huddersfield in the same week, and it just seemed like this was the time, this was the moment where the league title was decided, and now we're in a position where the last 3 games they've thrown it away. Now, to be fair to Newcastle, the damage really has been done by Brighton, who haven't capitalised on Newcastle's slip-ups. But at the same time, it's strange to me that this title race isn't done yet. I do personally think that Huddersfield is still in with a shout of the automatics, but I don't think it's Newcastle that are in any danger. They could still miss out on the league title, but I don't think they're in any danger of missing out on the top 2 altogether. Standout performers for me, it's Matt Ritchie. I think not only because of what he's doing with Newcastle, but also because the gap he's left at Bournemouth. You can see the difference in that side, and the difference he brings to Newcastle. He's always one of the best players on the field whenever I watch Newcastle play. So I have been very impressed with them. If I had to pick now, I would probably say Newcastle for the league title, but it's not definite. Like I say, I'm still very, very surprised that 3 weeks removed from that double header against Brighton and Huddersfield, that they're still only a point clear, and that's been my worry about them all season. So they have done very, very well this campaign, really, really well. But I'm still wondering if they haven't got that championship nous that I think a side like Brighton do.
Yeah, are achieving what they probably should be achieving, I guess is fair to say. What is their limit though, Ross? I mean, what are they aiming to be? I mean, obviously we say clearly a Premier League side, that is of course their aim, having gone down last year. But you look at Sunderland, for example, who are, I think we're all kind of agree they're hovering over that trapdoor to drop down to the Championship this year. It's another big northeast club. Middlesbrough, of course, are in trouble as well. I mean, if Newcastle go up, what do you think they have to do differently to actually become a regular, sustained Premier League club again? Because that squad doesn't look I don't know what the word is. Yeah,
there's a lot of players, and I was thinking about this the other week. Actually, I was thinking about how I was going to surmise a couple of clubs when the season was done, and Newcastle were one of the ones I was thinking of because their season's essentially done. They're going up this year. And I know there will be people at the end of the season asking me questions about what do Newcastle have to do, where do they have to rebuild, etc., like we had last year with a club like Burnley, for example. So I was looking at the side, I was looking at the squad, and for me, Carl Darlow is a shaky goalkeeper. He's very athletic, and that's great to see. He reminds me a lot of Anthony Lopez, and just in terms of his athleticism. But he also reminds me quite a lot of Artur Boruc in as much as he will drop a howler in a match and it will kill him off for the rest of the game, and he will have a terrible match for the rest of the game. Then Jamal Lascelles is a player that I've really liked watching develop since he left since he was first broke out at Nottingham Forest. But I don't think he's Premier League quality yet. I think he still needs more time. He'll probably get more time, but at the moment he's captain. He's leading that back line. I think he needs someone alongside him. The midfield, I think, still needs a bit more to it, and definitely I think they need an extra goal scorer because Dwight Gale has been brilliant this season, but at the same time he's been injured for I think the last 3 months on and off, and he's not had the goals and the opportunities that he's wanted / needed. So I think they still need a lot of changes, and I know that Rafa Benitez stayed with them because he'd hoped that when they came back up they could challenge for the top 10 and move back into Europe. I think they're a long way off that at the moment. At the same time, with Rafa Benitez there, with the stadium they've got, with the name the allure that the Newcastle name carries, there's nothing stopping them having an absolutely fantastic summer and surprising people next year. But right now, I'd say this squad is good enough for the Premier League, but there's 3 or 4 positions in it that I don't think, as of yet, are Premier League quality.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's fair, and it will be interesting to see just how much rebuilding they do, and whether they hang on to Rafa Benitez. I mean, I think the likelihood is they will, but it'd be interesting to see if other bigger clubs try to tempt him away in the summer. So that'll be one to keep an eye on. Josh, coming on to your Brighton. Now, you kind of said a short time ago, in fact, and over the course of the last few months, that you'd settle for second. You'd settle just for going up at this stage, given what's been happening before and the runs that have come off the wheels or come off the rails. Sorry, in recent seasons, 3 defeats in the last 5. Are you worried at this stage?
I think the international break couldn't have come at a better time for Brighton at the moment. We've got a week or so just to recuperate and get back on a run, which Brighton always do finish the season very strong. I think from what we saw at the beginning of the season, when you just looked at the league table without anyone kicking a football, that Brighton's chances of going up automatically were going to be tight. You had the likes of Aston Villa, Norwich and Newcastle all coming down, and then the resurgence of Leeds United and that unknown of Sheffield Wednesday as well, for whether or not they could challenge at that time. Overall, I'm quite pleased with the season. I think so long as they do go up automatically, I think that is and will be Brighton's finishing position. Isn't that? But I think the biggest concern at the moment would be that Duffy, who I think has been the standout performer for Brighton at the back. Lewis Dunk will get all the plaudits. However, I think Duffy and also Bruno at right back, they're the ones that are basically your underrated player. I think Duffy should have been in the team of the season over Lewis Dunk because I think he's just a lot more solid and younger, and just doesn't show the kind of silly mistakes that Lewis Dunk is prone to, that we've seen him get sent off for in this season and pick up stupid yellow cards. But that being said, I think the squad, when it goes up, will need a little bit of not necessarily an overhaul, but there's always a couple of teams that come up from the championship that only have 1 or 2 Premier League quality players, or maybe a few more in Brighton's case, but Newcastle are in quite a privileged position where they only really need to make 3 changes to their starting 11 in order to compete comfortably at the Premier League and probably get 15th or higher next season.
I suppose in theory, it's you've got the experience. That's the thing, isn't it? The Brighton experience of being in that position. And Ross, I have to get your view as well from a non-Brighton persuasion. I mean, it is about time, isn't it, that a club of that size does get up. I mean, they've been on the edge for a while. They've got the right stadium, the right infrastructure. You think of what they've come through, moving out of the Withdean, and they were a club that were on the brink of extinction, and now they're on the verge of the Premier League. It would be nice to see them finally make that step up, particularly this season, wouldn't it?
It would, and I know it's going to sound silly, but I'd still say it's a massive shock. Not because Brighton haven't done brilliantly this season and last, but for me that squad is top 10, but I don't think it's top 3. The squad they've got I don't think is high enough quality, especially when you compare it to teams elsewhere in the division. I know Norwich haven't had a brilliant season this year, but I think their squad is much better on the whole than Brighton's is. But Brighton are just, much like Bournemouth did a few years ago, they are just kind of united under the manager's banner, and I think that they as an 11 are playing above and beyond them as individuals. So I'd still be in the camp that says that a Brighton promotion would be a big shock, and to have Brighton in the Premier League would be in the same way we had Yeovil Town in the Championship a few seasons ago, or like this year we've got Burton Albion in the Championship. For me, it's as a squad, I think it's still a long way off what it's going to need to be a champion, to be a Premier League level squad. But there's nothing stopping them staying up, or at least putting in a decent challenge for it, because their strength is in being much better than the quality of the players they've got, being a team and being a unit. So it will be well deserved if it comes. But personally, I would be very, very surprised. Like I say, I don't think this squad is Premier League level. I don't personally even think it's a top 2 level, but it's the unity that they've brought together. It's the team ethic for me.
This is where I think Brighton will start to become a bit of a yo-yo team. I think there's always one that's knocking around when you think of times past. Like West Brom were one. I think Newcastle turned into a bit of a yo-yo team. And I think Brighton could be that next one that comes in. I think the squad could just, dip up for one season, buy a couple of Premier League players, drop down again and consolidate, go back up, and eventually we'll build a squad that way. I don't think, like we've seen with Swansea, who've managed to sustain a tenure in the Premier League after coming up with a squad that wasn't necessarily as good as everyone thought initially. I think we could see Brighton, or at least I expect Brighton, to become a bit of a yo-yo team for 3 or 4 seasons.
I think that's the only way they can go as well. Personally, I think that's the only thing you can do, because they're far too good for the Championship as a team, but as individuals, I don't think they're good enough for the Premier League. So I think you're completely right. I think you will get that yo-yo effect, and I think that will strengthen Brighton in the long run. But they have to keep the manager, and they have to keep that ethic. They have to have that team unity about them, which other teams have gone up and sacked the manager after a couple of months because they thought that it was the squad that had done the job. Whereas I think in Brighton's case, it's a huge part down to the manager.
I think that's the biggest worry, is if next season Chris Hughton's not doing particularly well in the Premier League and they act a little too hasty. Obviously, it depends on the performances. If they're absolutely shocking, then I want him gone. But I think Chris. Yeah, but I think it is a case of see how it is. And Brighton aren't a club to pull the trigger without thinking about it anyway. Not under this board.
Well, just occurred to me you could say the same about Burnley. When they came up a couple of seasons ago, they weren't ready for it in terms of the players they had, but it was Sean Dyche's team that had done it, and they took them up. He did very well with them in the Premier League, but it still ended up seeing them relegated. They stuck with him. They went up as champions, and now they're back. So I'm hoping they can follow in Burnley's footsteps.
Yeah, fair point. Okay, so this is where the show is going to start to go a bit strange for some of our regular viewers, because I'm going to sort of shift semi-hosting duties to Ross. Because Ross, I just want you to, I'm going to let you decide basically, who of the chasing pack do you want to talk about? And when I say the chasing pack, I'm going to give you an open field here. You can pick anyone between 3rd and, let's go all the way down to 9th and Preston, because I think that's the clutch of sides. So I'm going to let you have free reign here. Who do you want to talk about, and who do you want to ask Josh about?
Well, there's 4 or 5 teams in that collection I'd love to talk about, frankly. I'm going to say Fulham for you, actually, Chris, but I'm going to throw Josh Sheffield Wednesday first of all, because I personally I think this season, compared to last season anyway, I think Sheffield Wednesday have almost been stunned by how much they've progressed in the last 18 months, and for me they don't look solid enough yet to be in the playoffs. I don't have faith that they'd win a playoff. It's almost like they've still got a hangover from last year's final. Do you think they're safe in sixth? Do you still think they're one of the favourites for the playoff positions, or are you like me and believe there's perhaps a little bit more going on than we know? Because like I say, they seem very shaky to me.
I think it was last week that I tipped them to potentially move out of the top six, and I think that's still the case. That again, we've got coming to this international break, and it's how they deal with it. You're always going to get a couple of teams that come out of the international break very, very strong, and there's always those that it's come at the wrong time for them. I think this is make or break these last 8 games for Sheffield Wednesday, almost like 8 finals for them, just to make sure that they can cement that place in the top 6, because I think the chasing pack have got stronger form, or at least Norwich and Preston do, and I think those could be the people that will be coming in and looking to steal that spot, because I think almost everyone above Sheffield Wednesday is more or less secure in that top 6.
Yeah, like I said, the only one I can really see moving through the top 6 aside from Sheffield Wednesday are Huddersfield, and the only thing I can really see with Huddersfield is it will depend entirely on how Brighton do after the international break, and like you say, I think the international break came at a very good time for Brighton, so maybe they can sort their form out and get their head straight for the run-in. But Huddersfield do have a game in hand, and that game in hand is against Wolves. Now, Wolves have been in very good form themselves as of late. You'd still expect Huddersfield to win that game, which would then bring them only 3 points behind Brighton Hove Albion. So other than Sheffield Wednesday, I think Huddersfield are the only movers and shakers that I can really see from the playoffs. But I know, Kris, you are kind of hoping that Fulham are the club that can take advantage of Sheffield Wednesday. I think Josh and I both agreed last week that Preston North End are our sneaky picks for it. But Fulham have easily been the most aesthetically pleasing team in the division this year. Some very good young players as well there. We know about Ryan Sessegnon, who's the full-back that really should have scored a hat-trick the other week, except the penalty was taken off him. I don't know how much you've actually seen of them this year, because they haven't been on TV a great deal, but have you been impressed by Fulham, especially when you said at the start of the year you picked them to go up, and I wasn't the only one that found that quite funny, but here we are. They're only a point off it now, and they've got a decent chance.
Chris knows. Well, I have to get something right every once in a while. No, I just looked at the squad, and weirdly, Jokanovic kind of impressed me in the things, the way he comes across, the way he sort of doesn't seem to take any nonsense, but he's impressed me tactically as well. And I don't know what it is about him. It's just something that I've looked at pre-season. I thought, I wonder if he might just do a decent job with them. I thought he did a fairly good job he was at Watford, wasn't he? For about a year.
He took them up, but he didn't go up with them.
That's right. And then he went to Israel, I think, from memory. He went for I think it's about half a season there, but I like the cut of his jib, if you will, and like you said, that squad that they've got. I mean, I always like a squad that's quite young, or a squad that's got options that are young at least, and that they have got some elder statesmen. I mean, Sonny Luco's 28 now. Scott Parker's still there. I don't know if he's played. In fact, he has 28 games this season. I didn't realise it was that many. But when you see Ryan Fredericks, who I think is ex-Spurs, I think from memory, Tom Kearney's been obviously one of the standout players in the Championship, full stop. I just think when you blend that in with someone like the young lad you mentioned, Sessegnon, isn't it?
Yeah.
Who's being looked at by bigger clubs. I just think you always get one club, don't you, that gets some momentum towards the business end of the season, if you will, to use a cliche. And I wonder if Fulham have got enough on their side. I think Sheffield Wednesday are the team they could replace. And they are, I know it's a bit old-fashioned, that ground, on the river and everything. It would just be really nice to see a club like that back in the Premier League. I know it's another London club. People say, "Oh, not another London club," but they're a proper footballing club and a proper family club, and the support's been good down there. And I just think they're riding that crest of a wave. I don't know what their fixture list is for the rest of the season, but I'd really like to see them go up. So hopefully, I might have called something right there, and they do get their rewards.
And they've only lost 9 games as well, which is only one more than Newcastle have, and they're top of the league. So very, very impressive season for Fulham. I am doing a great disservice ignoring Leeds here, because Leeds have obviously been one of the stories of the season after so much turmoil over the years with managerial changes. But the last one I'm going to pick out from the chasing pack, as it were, are Norwich, and I'm going to back questions to both of you because I'm kind of tired talking about Norwich because I can't predict them anymore. Start with you, Kris. What happened with Norwich this year? How are they in this position? And is it possible they could still get sixth? Would you put it past them this year?
It's possible. I mean, anything's possible. But the Norwich thing, I don't know. For me, they never... You know when a team goes down and they're just abysmal in the Premier League, and you just think, like, you really need to clear out, you need to start again, you need a new, fresh philosophy. Norwich had the look to me of a bit stale, if you know what I mean. They didn't look like a club that had been refreshed enough and ready to go enough. In theory, that squad should be higher than it is, I think. I mean, there's enough good players in it. Alex Neil, I mean, you know, we've had the running joke, haven't we? Will he, won't he? And eventually, obviously, he did. I'm not convinced by a couple of their players. I think John Ruddy is not the best goalkeeper. You look at that defence, Whittaker, Martin, Bassong, all 30 plus. Even the younger player, or Michael Turner? I think it is, 33. He hasn't even played this season. Ryan Bennett, Closer, and Ivo Pinto, all 27 plus. I think Dykes is the only one that's a young defender. Same in midfield as well. Dorrans, Houlihan, Malumbu, Jarvis, Johnny Howson. They're all up there in age. And they just didn't look like a side that had been refreshed to me at all. And yeah, there should still be enough talent there to get rid of sixth. But they are going to have to go on a bit of a run. Is it Alan Irvine in charge now? Isn't
He's
it?
there at the moment, yeah.
So he's gonna be there for the time being until they get a permanent manager, I would assume. The instability doesn't help, and I wouldn't put money on them. I think a Leeds, a Huddersfield, a Fulham are far more likely. But 3 or 4 wins, you know, it is possible. And they've 1 defeat in 5, so they are turning it around. But you only have to look down at Derby and realise what can happen if you don't go on a good run. So I won't be putting any of my hard-earned money on Norwich to go up this season. Not now.
It should also be said that I think Mitchell Dykes has been one of the signings of the January window. He's been brilliant since he's gone to Norwich. I think he's on loan from Ajax, but he's been absolutely fantastic. The Norwich question I'll send your way, Josh, is about the next manager, because Roy Hodgson has apparently turned them down. Obviously, they missed out on both Warburton and Rowett, who are now at Forest and Derby, respectively. Is there any names left to jump out at you? Because the two I can think of off the top of my head are Alan Pardew or Steve McLaren, but I'm not sure either would take them on.
No, the only other one I could think of, I believe he's not gone anywhere, would be Nigel Pearson. What they really need is, as Kris has alluded to, a complete clear out at the top end, because they've got an ageing squad. I'm not sure what Alex Neil wanted to do, but the rumour was that he was fired over his plans for the transfer in the summer. I think what he wanted to do is get rid of someone like Houlihan, who, as we've gone through, is ageing. That whole squad is quite old, and they've got a batch of young players coming through. The Murphy twins are the two that come off the top of my head. I think that's what we should be looking for in a manager, someone who can deal with that transition of rebuilding a squad. I'm not sure any of the names that we've said are really actually quite good at that. Perhaps it's a continental choice that we'll go with. Maybe someone, I don't know, probably from the French league, who's used to the turnover of players.
Thanks for that, cheeky monkey. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Well, you throw me completely off there, Josh, by that little dig. I'm going to throw you to the bottom. Well, I say bottom, mid-table, before we cover the bottom. Shall we just look at the clubs in midfield, kind of mid-table-ish? How many of those clubs are underachieving? I'm just going to throw some names at you here. Aston Villa, 12th. Derby County, 10th. Queen's Park Rangers, although on a good run, it has to be said, 15th. Same can be said for Wolves in 16th. Ipswich, 17th. Birmingham, 18th. They are everywhere you go. We'll go to the bottom in a second, but is there any of those you particularly want to have a little word about, Josh? Any of those that come to the forefront of your mind and say they are really underachieving? Or do you think they're all in the same kettle of fish where they may be expecting too much?
I think I'll pick two out of this. I'll go with Villa first. I think they are still feeling that hangover of what Di Matteo did to them earlier in the transfer window and the early part of the season. I don't think he bought particularly well for the Championship. And now that they've finally got Steve Bruce in, I think it has put them back over a season in terms of what their long-term plan was when they got in Di Matteo. I think that's where they are now. I think they did have early shouts of potentially sneaking into the playoffs, but it looks like now they're just going to be a case of consolidating the season, and Steve Bruce can make sure he's drilling the players to make sure they can go again next season, where I think they'll be expected to finish in the top 6 or maybe the automatic promotion places with the kind of resources they've got. I think it all depends of who drops out of the top flight to then join them in the Championship. And a similar thing to QPR. I think QPR, now that they've got Ollie in charge, I think it is a case of consolidating. They've needed to overhaul that squad and just reduce that mercenary wage bill they'd racked up from the Premier League, where I think Tony Fernandes went a little bit heavy buying the wrong players. I think with Sandro has now finally left the club, I think that was kind of the sign of them almost completing that job, and now it's a case of the slate is finally clean and they can get back to pushing up the table. Again, I expect them to finish somewhere near the top next year, especially with the resources they've got in place.
Yeah, they are one of those clubs that you do look at and you think there's potential for them to springboard up the league. So
should also be said, that Ravel Morrison is now at QPR, so
is he?
It's definitely one to keep an eye on next season.
He's still alive, and if there's one manager that you probably back to get something out of him, it's good old Ollie. So yeah, that may well be worth keeping an eye on. Either that, or he'll just smash him up in the air and trading, and he'll never be seen again. One of the two. Sticking with you, Josh, this is your opportunity to quiz Ross. So we'll swing it round the other way. Why don't you pick out a couple of teams down the bottom in the relegation scrap that you might want to quiz Ross on? Any of those that you particularly want to pick out there?
Well, I think the one of the more interesting stories, although it has been well-worn ground, is sitting in 20th with Nottingham Forest. It was my dark horse to get relegated at the mid-season point, and they've not done anything to help me look like an idiot. Ross, what would you say on Notts Forest's trials and tribulations across this season?
Well, it dates back to the Ollie Burke scenario, where essentially he was sold via the back door and Montagnier didn't have any time to reinvest the money. And Burke, at the start of the Championship season, was by far and away the standout player, not just in the Championship, but in England, as far as I was concerned, because that Nottingham Forest side has been ravaged the past few seasons. It's been chopped and changed by so many managers. They've brought in so many different players to try and play so many different formations and styles. They had Philippe Montagnier in, who essentially played with a Jurgen Klopp. Everyone goes at goal and no one really watches their own. And it didn't do them brilliantly, because the Championship moved so quickly that you could score 40 goals by December, but you can also have conceded 40 goals. And they did get punished on a number of occasions, especially when they lost Ollie Burke and they lost that forward momentum and they lost that attacking threat. As the season's gone on, obviously they've had their issues off the field as well. I think they had they had their capacity reduced. I think it was by about 5,000 seats, because someone didn't have the right form or leaflet or whatever it was he was meant to get during the off season, and they've had this American ownership fall through. I think Fawaz decided in late December, early January, that he wasn't going to sell to this American consortium that were in for them. So there's been protests off the field as well. It looks like Fawaz now has invested some money to try and keep them in the Championship, because he recognises that Forest are a much more attractive proposition to new buyers if they're still in with a shout of Championship football next season. I think Mark Warburton is a good choice. I think honestly you could have swapped him and Gary Rowett around and had a more appropriate fit for both of those clubs, but Warburton will try and play a possession-based style, and I think he's got some decent players there nowadays to try and implement it. But he's going to need the summer. And the first game he had against Gary Rowett's Derby in the quote-unquote Derby game, it was very good signs. You know, they looked quite dangerous, and you could certainly see that something was being laid down there. So they're going to need another window. Whether or not they're going to have adopted his philosophies quickly enough to keep themselves out of trouble, I don't know, because you look at a side like Blackburn Rovers, for example, who are in fantastic form since they changed their manager. I think they are probably a danger to all the clubs above them, and certainly if Nottingham Forest don't adjust quickly enough to Warburton's methods, then you could very well be right, and you could be seeing Nottingham Forest in League One next season.
Yeah, I think we've agreed that Wigan and Rotherham are both gone. From
Rotherham, definitely. Are
yeah.
we convinced Wigan have gone?
I'm pretty sure Wigan have gone. I mean, they've just lost their manager as well, Warren Joyce. They were one of the lowest goal scorers in the division, and I think since he's come in, they only scored less than 10 goals, somewhere around that, and he's been there since, I want to say, November. So I think they've missed their chance. I think the opportunity for them to stay up has long since gone. It's the gap's now 7 points, and I think there are teams in that fight that are going to have a lot more about them than Wigan, unless they can bring in a new manager and really change it around.
So who's the other team we're thinking is falling down then? Because I mean, Blackburn are in that spot at the moment for consecutive draws. I mean, bear in mind this pod as a whole is, we're looking at the whole season as well as the current standings. So we're 3/4 of the way through the season now. Blackburn have never really been. What can we say? They've never really been stable, have they, the whole season? And now they've got, is it Tony Mowbray, isn't it, who's down there now? He's kind of steadied the ship. I mean, they're unbeaten in 5, but they need to be getting wins, don't they? I mean, if you look at safety, technically they're a point behind it because there's 3 teams above them on 41 points. But really, they've got to be aiming for the Birminghams and the Ipswiches on 45 points. So do you both agree Blackburn are one of the favourites, or do you think the Burton Albions, the Bristol Cities, are they more likely to fall down if indeed it's not Forest?
I think looking at, because we're getting to that point of the season where goal difference now means everything as well, that Blackburn Rovers have got -11 out of the 3 or 4 above them. That's it's one of the best. On there, you got Birmingham on -16, Bristol City on -3. So I think they're safe from that point of view, because you're getting to it where goal difference almost adds an extra point to it. Level with Nottingham Forest, but obviously if they win, Blackburn win, that drops down to at least -10, and then Burton Albion on -14. I think you're also looking at the squads and where they realistically think they should be, and I think Burton Albion have got a bit more fight about their squad. They came into the season knowing it was going to be hard, whereas I think the Nottingham Forest squad was more expecting mid-table mediocrity potentially at this time, and they could have had their flip-flops on, and now they've got to start digging in and grinding out results. Obviously, changing manager is going to help that, but I still think personally they're my favourite to drop in and go down.
Do you concur, Ross? Do you feel there is another team to look at?
Yes, and you can call me cynical, you can say I've got an agenda because I've been harping on about them all season. I'm really concerned about Birmingham City, and if I was to pick a team to be a sneaky suspect for the bottom 3, for me it's Birmingham, because they've won 2 games under Zola since he's been in. One of them was against Wolves, and they were down to 10 men and barely survived that game. And the other win was against a 10-man Fulham, and they scored in the 80th minute to win that game. I'm really concerned for Birmingham because they are trying to play a style of football that doesn't suit the players they've got. And every time I watch them, I don't understand what Zola is trying to do with them, and I just don't see where their points are coming from. They managed to dig in and get a 0-0 against Newcastle before the international break, but by all accounts it should have been an absolute slaughter. Newcastle should have pummeled them into the ground, but Newcastle's finishing wasn't very good. For me, I think Birmingham are one of the most concerning teams in the relegation fight. The caveat to that is they do have some fixtures with the teams in and around them in their running. I know Burton are one of them, and I think Burton have probably got the weakest squad in the entire division, sans perhaps Rotherham. So Burton, I think, are in trouble, but they've made some very good loan signings in the January window with Lasse Vigen Christensen and Corley Woodrow, both in from Fulham, who alone could probably keep them up and create the chances they need. But for me, it's Birmingham. I think they're the real danger team, because Bristol City I don't think have been anywhere near as bad as their hideous run was, or that their hideous run made them look. I think most of the part of this season Bristol City have been absolutely fantastic. Nottingham Forest are in trouble, and it wouldn't shock me to see them go down. but I think it will now depend on how quickly they acclimatise to Warburton. But for me, it's Birmingham, because I just don't see where the points are coming from myself. They could probably get some draws here and there, but draws aren't going to be enough at this stage, because I think a team like Blackburn are going to get the wins they need.
It'd be very interesting to see if Zola actually survives the season. Given that run of form and the fact that these new owners have put the money in, do they really want to be owning a club in League One? I'm not so sure. So, yeah, I think that's a fair shout indeed. Now we have got the team of the year announced for all three leagues we're going to cover tonight. Just before we go to that, I'm going to give both the panelists an opportunity to kind of have any other business. So. Josh, is there anything else you want to particularly highlight, talk about, praise, defend, slate, whatever it is, about this season's championship as a whole so far, or any particular clubs, players? It's a free-for-all. You can go for gold on anything you want to bring up at this stage.
Well, I could just spend another 10 minutes harping on about how much I like Brighton, but I think that would be selfish. And I will go to East Anglia and look at Ipswich. I think Ipswich are the kind of underdog or just appreciated team from the Championship this season. There's a lot going on down there. Mick McCarthy has been, touted to be leaving left, right, and centre, and he's stayed in the job. And if I remember rightly, he's one of the longest-serving managers in England after Arsene Wenger. I think he might be second. I'm sure someone will tell me if I'm wrong on that, but I think the job he was doing has been almost overshadowed by what's been happening with their neighbours over the road with Norwich and Alex Neil. I think Ipswich could be one of those teams that you look at and think, could be in danger of going down, but I think Mick knows what he's doing with that and with that team, and I think they haven't had enough spoken about them this season. And I think they should continue with him for their. And as Ross has just said to me, he's 8th longest with 4 years. To be honest, the fact that I thought 4 years put you up into second is probably telling you about all managerial, choices across England at the moment, because people generally don't stay there that long. But
it's nuts.
That'd be my one.
To be fair to you, Josh, Sean Dyche, Eddie Howe, Neil Ardley, Gareth Ainsworth are all above him. They're also on 4 years. Jim Bentley at Morecambe is on 5 years. So there's not really a lot between them. Paul Tisdale is by far and away in second with 10 at Exeter. But yeah, it's such a small gap. Mick McCarthy honestly could have been anywhere in the top 10.
It's nuts, isn't it? It is absolutely nuts. And with Mick McCarthy, I can't ever think about Mick McCarthy and not think about that wonderful piece of a Vine went round where it's him and looking at the camera and giving that little glance and that little wink. It's just the best gif I've ever seen. So if you haven't seen that, do look it up. I can't remember what it is. Is it a Luther Vandross song behind him or something like that? You have to look it up. It's hilarious.
Personally, I think it's better with Just the Two of Us by Bill Withers. I think that's where it really kicks in.
That is even better, of course, naturally. Seeing as you've piped up, Ross, to sort of close this out before you look at this team of the year, anything you've particularly turned your head? I mean, other than the obvious, because we know you love your Championship football, but anything this season so far that has happened, or anything you're looking forward to happen?
For what's going to happen, clearly it's the playoffs. That's always the most entertaining part of the year for me. But one of the clubs I wanted to have a quick look at was Cardiff City, mainly because the job that has been done there since Neil Warnock went in, or we probably went in September, October time at this point, has been so impressive. And as of late, Kenneth Zahore, who's there, I think he's Dutch. I can't remember exactly where he is. I think he's Dutch. Either way, he's their tall striker who has been banging in all kinds of goals. You look at him and you think he's a Ken Wynne-Jones kind of type, where he's athletic, tall, probably a hold-up player, good in the air. But he has scored some absolutely incredible goals from all kinds of angles and all kinds of distances. And they're now all the way up to 13th. And I suspect that if the owner, Vincent Tan, now believes in them a bit more, because he certainly didn't seem to under Paul Trollope, if he now believes that Neil Warnock can do something amazing with this side, he might open his pockets again in the summer, and that might be able to push Cardiff City up into a playoff place next year. So I think Cardiff, not just for the turnaround this season, but for the opportunities they now have at their feet for next season, I think Cardiff deserve a mention as well.
Yeah, fair point indeed. So we'll have to, of course, do our who's going up, who's going down. So I suppose I can kick us off. Let's have a look. So I think going down. I think we're going to Rotherham probably are doomed. I'm not sure Burton Albion will survive. I hope they do. But I think at the moment they'd be the one that I'd look at just in terms of squad depth and just overall package. I think the others have got just a little bit more that they can give. Bristol City are the other one I'd look at and think danger, but I think Burton might be the ones to go for a Burton, if you will. For me, Newcastle, Brighton go up. I actually think Brighton might win the league. I don't know why. I just have a sneaking suspicion. So I hope they do, just for Josh's sake. So I'm going to go with those two going up. Just for interest's sake, I'll say Brighton win it. And to come through the playoffs, I want it to be Leeds, of course. Of course I want it to be Leeds. Fulham, sorry. I got that all asked about face. I want it to be Fulham, of course, but I think it will be Leeds. I really can't call who's going to be in the playoffs. I think if I had to put my head on the block now, I think it'd be Huddersfield, Leeds, Sheffield Wednesday and Fulham. But yeah, I think Leeds are just everything. The stars seem to be aligning, and things seem to be in place for Leeds to almost like Hull with what's his face, the big chunky lad, Dean Windass when he got that winner. It almost feels like that kind of season for Leeds. And if for nothing else, it'd be nice to see the big Swede. Is it Mr. Janssen or Janssen at the Pontus Janssen? Just because he's a proper defender, isn't he? It'd be nice to see him in the Premier League. But that might not be a popular vote, but I think Leeds will probably end up going up. So, who are your picks, Josh? Who do you think are going up and going down?
So I'm going to start with saying, Kris, you're deluded. It's Newcastle top. They're going to win the title. It will then be Brighton dropping into second, and then through the playoffs, I think it does depend on what Huddersfield do with that game in hand, from who goes up through it, because we'll then get into the position of which order they're finishing in, and then who therefore gets the two-legged semi-final, where they'll end up going back and forth to each other's home grounds. And depending on who comes up, I think Preston might sneak in, but whoever's in sixth, if it's Sheffield Wednesday or Preston, that's not a nice away fixture for Huddersfield if they come in third. So I've got a feeling if Leeds can keep fourth, they go up and avoid whoever drops into sixth, because I think at Wembley they'll be absolutely fine against a Sheffield Wednesday or a Preston or a Fulham potentially, who could sneak in through that, or say Huddersfield get through that tie. But yeah, as with you, I'm going to go with Leeds United to go up. And then at the other end of the table, I believe this is the same bottom three that I called at the halfway point, with Rotherham at the bottom, Wigan at 23rd, and then Forest I'm going to go with sneaking in and dropping down to League One.
Ouch. Okay, and Ross, who have you gone for?
I'm going to join you guys with Rotherham and Wigan going down. I think they're both long since gone, and Rotherham have conceded 87 goals with 8 games left, so they're well on course to concede 100. They will be the first English team to go down. Wigan, I just don't think have enough at this point in the season. For me, I think the third team that's going to go down, for everything I've just said about Birmingham, I think the team that will go down is Burton Albion. Not because I don't really like them, and it's been fantastic to have Burton Albion in the Championship this season. Like I say, it's a massive coup for that club to be as high as they are. But I just think on the whole their squad is probably the weakest. So they're my pick for the bottom three. For the top, all season long I've been saying a Championship side, a Championship side that's been there and done that will win the league. But as of today, I think it's going to be Newcastle's. Obviously, if Brighton then win it, then I really should have stuck to my guns. But I'm going to go Newcastle top. I am going to stick with Brighton in second, but that opinion could change depending on how Huddersfield do in that game in hand. If they win it, then I think a lot of pressure gets put on Brighton, and I'm not sure whether or not they're going to be able to see out their run-in. So I'm going to stick with Brighton for now. And my team from the playoffs, I think much like you guys, for me, I think it's Leeds. Not just because they've been in such fantastic form, but because I always back a team that knows well in advance they are going to be in the playoffs. And I know at the moment you have got a pick between Leeds and Reading, and I just don't think Reading are there yet. This has been their first season under Jaap Stam, and he's still developing things at Reading. So for me, I think it's going to be Leeds United. I think they've come much further along in their journey in their first year with Monk than Reading have with Stam. So for me, it's Newcastle, Brighton and Leeds going up.
Interesting. Okay, so I think it's fair to say we're all a little bit undecided. Josh, who's in the team of the year that's been picked by the? I think it's by the sponsors, isn't it? Pick this team out. So who's the Championship team of the year at the moment?
If I remember rightly, this is by the managers. It's either the managers or the football writers that put this together, because it goes to a vote, which is why we've got quite a strange-looking team. But I'll start between the sticks. You've got David Stockdale from Brighton. Then left back, you've got Malone from Fulham, Lewis Dunk at centre back, Pontus Jansson accompanying him there, and Smith at right back from Huddersfield. In the midfield, I'm not sure how this would work, but you've got pod favourite Anthony Knockaert from Brighton, John Joe Shelvey from Newcastle, and Mui from Huddersfield. And then a front three. Not sure how well this would actually work in real life, but it's Glenn Murray from Brighton, Gale from Newcastle, and Chris Wood from Leeds United. And the manager of the season has been given to David Wagner. I think that one potentially has movement based on who goes up in the playoffs.
I think that's probably a fair one. Ross, just before we transition into League One, anybody you're particularly annoyed is not in that, or anybody that you feel should be?
Well, I think Josh and I have both got some opinions on some of the players that should be in there. For me, immediately I look at Glenn Murray. He's clearly been picked on the amount of goals he's scored for Brighton, and that's the reason he's in, because all three of those players that are in that front three, I think, are the top three goal scorers in the division. For me, Helder Costa should be in there instead of Murray for a start, because without Helder Costa, Wolves would already be down as far as I'm concerned. He's been just the most sensational player for them this season. And for me, he's one of the players of the year, flat out. The other one I would personally pick out is John Joe Shelvey. I would take it out and put Conor Hourihane in, because the Barnsley side we saw up until January, when they lost, essentially the spine of their team with Hourihane, Winnall and Bree. Hourihane was the major player. He was the one driving that team forward, and I think the impact he had at Barnsley has been dramatic, not just while he was there, but now he's gone. So for me, I think you should be putting Hourihane in instead of Shelvey. But at the same time, even then, I'm being harsh to Tom Kearney, who's been brilliant for Fulham, Matt Ritchie, who's been brilliant for Newcastle, and I know Josh, you've got a list as well of players. I think starting with Dunk, I think you'd put Duffy in instead of him, wouldn't you?
Yes, I'd absolutely agree with you on that one. Dunk's got to drop out of there personally for me. I think I was saying basically the same as you. I've just done Ritchie for Shelvey, and Costa for Murray, and Tom Kearney's got to come in for someone as well in all of that.
Conor Hourihane's the one for me. That was the one we discussed pre-pod. I think he's every time I see him, I feel like he affects the game. So I think it's a bit of an odd one to see him missing. But let us know if you've got a player that you think should be getting more recognition that isn't in that team of the year. Let us know. Drop us a tweet. We'll do our best to reply to you. So interesting stuff. Okay, so that's the Championship with how many games is there left now? Is there 8 games left. Okay, so it's getting to the business end. Soon it will all be clear. And speaking of the business end, that takes us to our next league, which is League One. I always want to say Ligue 1 for obvious reasons, but no, this is League One. Let's go back to Ross quickly then to start us off. So Ross, rather than going sort of down individual teams like we did for the Championship, for Leagues 1 and 2, we're just going to pick out some of the stories or some of the teams to put focus on for various reasons. So who's the first team you want to look at in this division? Because we've got Sheffield United and Bolton looking like the two that are going to go up realistically, and then a whole clutch of sides that are in and around the top end. So is there anyone in the top end you want to put focus on?
Oh, there's plenty. Sheffield United and Bolton are one of the obvious ones, but perhaps I'll leave them for the pair of you. Scunthorpe have been so good nearly the entire season, and then since the turn of the year, they've just been awful, and they've slipped right out of the automatic promotion race. Rochdale have been brilliant this season, and they've slipped out of the playoffs after a recent wobble. The one I want to focus on, though, is Fleetwood Town, who I think a lot of people already know the backstory of Fleetwood Town, who reinvested while they were still in non-league, and they had 6 promotions in 10 years to come up to League One. I think I'm right in saying they are already on course to finish in their highest ever league position, and they've already accumulated their highest league points total. I think I'm right in saying that they're in and around smashing some huge records for their kind of club. If they were to go up, which for me, I think they'd be my pick from the playoffs as well, because I think the top two's in lockdown now. If they were to go up, that would be, for me, bigger than the story of when Yeovil went up a couple of seasons back. Fleetwood Town should not be anywhere near, even League One, let alone the Championship. But the work that Juve Rosler has done there has been so profound and so impactful. They are now one of the best teams to watch. I think I'm right in saying they've only been stopped from scoring on 4 occasions this season. I know it's very, very low, but they've just been so good, and such a wonderful surprise in League One. They've easily been one of the best stories from the division this year.
Fair enough. And you rightly say, I mean, if they do go up, that would be quite the achievement given the sort of size club they are. I think the top two I would focus on, Sheffield United. I mean, they are, I think when you looked at the start of the season, they would have been one of the clubs that would have been in and around. So I do think they will probably end up going through or going up to the Championship as winners. Bolton have been really impressive. I follow a guy actually on Twitter who follows them, and he puts up videos each week and tweets pictures, and they seem to be having a jolly good time. I watched the game the other night. I think you watched as well, Ross, against Oxford.
Oh, it was a blinder, wasn't it?
Absolute humdrum of a game. Yeah, the free kick in that game from the Oxford lad was something special, I tell you. But really good game. And I think that showed Bolton for what they are, like really, really good footballing side, functional. Their gaffer, what's his name? It escapes me.
Which one, sorry? Sheffield United?
Bolton's.
Oh, Bolton's is Phil Parkinson.
Phil Parkinson, because he's the lad who got on that cup run with Bradford when they beat Chelsea that year, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And he really comes across as a manager who's properly invested in that club. Was really, really over the moon about that result the other night. And I think they've got something good going on there. I think Jimmy Phillips is on their coaching staff there as well, who's a former player at Bolton back in the John McGinley days and the McAteer and Alan Stubbs days, if you remember that far back. So I think those two are going up. What I want to ask somebody about, Josh, I'm going to ask you about Millwall. They're sitting in 7th at the moment. A couple of poor results in recent weeks, a loss and 2 draws in the last 3. Do you think they should be a little bit higher up the table, or certainly higher accumulation of points? They got 60 points. But when you think that third place Fleetwood have got 69, is there an argument to say that Millwall's slightly underachieving, having come down from the Championship?
Yeah, I would agree with that. The start they had was, they were absolutely flying, but they've ended up getting a number of poor results in basically since the turn of the year to kind of get them to drop down the league. I think they probably were concentrating on those FA Cup ties, to be honest, where they had Spurs and Leicester, wasn't it, that they beat down at the Den. I think, I would expect from them to have at least get into the playoffs. I think if they really fall out of there, there's some questions that will need to be had when they go for the post-season debrief. But at the moment, I think, we say there's still a large number of games to go, and they've got a number of games in hand on teams above them. And I think if they, put them away and actually win those games, then they would be up in, I think, just 5th or so, depending on how the results went. But I think they are a team that should be doing better.
Yeah, I think so. I agree with that. I do think they should probably be aiming higher, but there's still time, of course. They could go on a run. Another team I just want to pick the focus on here, Ross, in the sort of top half before we venture down a little bit lower. Bristol Rovers, they're having a fairly decent season. When you consider, I'm sure I'm right in saying that they were on the verge of conference football in the past couple of years. So of course they were. Conference football.
Back-to-back promotions.
Promotions, that's right. So get me facts right there. I mean, is what they've done this season equally worth a mention? I mean, the fact that they are still in a position where they're comfortable, I think it's fair to say, in League One, and probably going to sustain it. I mean, it's quite a story, isn't it, from where they were a short time ago?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a colossal turnaround, because I remember the day they went down, and it was a lot of shock when they left League Two. And I remember the fans entering the field once the final whistle had blown, and it wasn't so much to riot or to kick off. There was just a lot of very blank faces on the pitch, as if they just couldn't believe that a club as big as Bristol Rovers was now going to be in the conference. But they've done brilliantly. They absolutely smashed the National League that year. They came up into League Two, and a lot of people said that they had a team that was much better than, fighting the relegation places and being mid-table. I don't think many people had them going up, but they did that as well. They went straight up after coming up from the conference. They're now in League One, and again, it was one of those where you just thought, all right, are they going to be mid-table now? Are they going to be suffering from relegation? As it turns out, they've not only taken that on, but they're now up to 9th, and you can't count them out of the playoff places yet. They're still in a very good position, and even if they don't make the playoffs, which I don't personally suspect they will, but they've still got a decent shout, next season will be a fantastic year for them, I think. I think they'll be right in the mix. But the work they've done since they originally went down all those years ago now, I think it was 3-4 seasons ago now, absolutely incredible to see Bristol Rovers back in a position where I recognise them. They've always been a League One side to me, Bristol Rovers, and it's nice to see them back up there, and it's nice to see them doing so well after, like you say, a very rough couple of years.
Yeah, it's quite the story there, and unfortunately,
I think losing Matty Taylor in January to a very loud and unexpected transfer deadline day for them.
Yes,
with him departing across the city. Personally, I don't think Bristol Rovers will go up, because they lost to Coventry at the weekend, and it peed me right off. Because it was the only team I follow playing in England this weekend, and they lost to the bottom side.
Oh dear. Yeah, that's never good. But no, I do think it's fair to say that a side like that, they deserve praise. They deserve mentioning as to where they've come from, where they are now. We should look at some of the sides down the bottom end, of course. Sadly. Josh, a couple really to maybe put the spotlight on. I look at Charlton down in 16th, Northampton in 14th, who I think expected better this season. Gillingham down in 19th, Oldham even, Bury. There's quite a few down there. Anybody that particularly captures your interest? We're going to head down to the very bottom in a minute, but just for the sort of the mid-table or lower, is there anyone that stands out there as a bit of a surprise for you?
I think Charlton have certainly taken a lot of headlines this season for things off the field, and have kind of dominated that for quite a few seasons. The team I'd actually like to go for is a little higher up, and would be the fact that AFC Wimbledon look to be on course to finishing above MK Dons this season. I'm pretty sure people must be living under a rock for the past 10 years if they don't know the story behind AFC Wimbledon and Milton Keynes. But just for anybody who did miss it, it would have been back in the 90s that Wimbledon, the team that were infamous for getting to that FA Cup final with the likes of Vinnie Jones. I can't think for the top of my head what they were called. The Crazy Gang.
Yes.
For one. It was the Crazy Gang. Synonymous with that team, and Wimbledon being a mainstay in the top division, getting there against all the odds, going for a bit of an American theme, and the owner thinking, Milton Keynes, what's it missing? I've got loads of roundabouts, got lots of concrete jungles, could do with a football team, and moved Wimbledon up there. And of course that caused a lot of anger, because it wasn't something that's really been done since probably Arsenal moving to North London. I think it was the last time that a team moved to a different part of the city, or completely out of the city from Wimbledon's case. And so the Phoenix Club, AFC Wimbledon, started and had to start at the bottom of the pyramid and work their way back up. And with MK Dons getting relegated last season and Wimbledon sitting in League One, they've got to meet. I think last week they also met in the derby. I mean, Ross discussed that with some potentially childish things done by AFC Wimbledon with the case of not mentioning MK Dons in the programme, not really giving them any airtime. But that looks to be one of those rivalries that you'll look at from the, in about 20 or 30 years, a bit like we do with the Brighton Crystal Palace one, and go, what's the story there? Because it doesn't seem on paper like they should have a derby. But yeah, AFC Wimbledon would be the team for me for this season.
Yeah, that was all very petty, wasn't it? With the whole affair of not mentioning the club, that was all a bit unnecessary. Okay, there's two clubs left I want to pick on in League One, and we're going to combine the two together because they're both in different levels of mess, but in the same kind of mess, if you will. So I'm going to give you both a say. Swindon and Coventry are the two I want to pick out. Now, I know Josh has got a bit on Coventry in a second, and we had a question from one of our listeners as well on them. But Ross, I'm going to let you have a full amusing time on tactics. Tim Swindon. He was recently, of course, banned for using some rather colourful language. And Swindon as a club, I mean, they got a victory, didn't they, over Millwall this past weekend, actually, a very late winner in that game, and it was a result they needed. They are, I mean, what has happened down at the county ground? I mean, they just seem to be a complete mess.
Well, they are. They have been for a very long time. A few seasons back now, I want to say 2-3 seasons ago, they were up in the top half, and they had a very, very good squad there. They had Nicky Ajose, they had Massimo Luongo. They had an excellent team, and they were turning up a lot of trees, and then they missed out on the playoffs that year, and then slowly they've been cherry-picked of their best players. We just had a knock-on effect, clearly, of them sliding down the league. But they seem to have stemmed the tide the past couple of seasons, and then this year, obviously there was a lot of rumours about the Red Bull takeover, which obviously turned out to be a bit of a red herring and didn't go off. What we did get instead was Tim Sherwood rocking up in some kind of faux managerial director of football role. I don't even know what his official title is, but he essentially picks the team, chooses the tactics, is involved in the halftime team talks and that kind of thing, but he's not officially the manager, and he doesn't go out after the games for the post-match press conferences, which has been a massive bugbear with Swindon fans this season, that although Sherwood has got all of these fingers in so many pies, he's not getting any of the blame. He's not the one fronting up to the media. It's always being put on the current manager, Luke Williams, who I'm shocked is still there and is still putting up with it, frankly. The only piece of media he's done since then was a promotion for the new Football Manager game, if I'm right. And Swindon fans are just up in arms that he just hasn't been doing anything, and he hasn't been blamed for enough. So they are in a bizarre position that I've never seen before. I doubt as if we'll ever see the same again. But it's one thing to have someone. I remember Harry Redknapp going in at Derby County last year as a director of football for like 6 months just to kind of help things along and give some opinions. But he was never directly involved in the tactics. He was never directly involved with the players and that kind of thing. To have Tim Sherwood essentially being the manager but not officially being the manager and palming all the problems off on Luke Williams is a bizarre situation. And I don't know how they got into it. I don't know how they get out of it. Not by keeping Tim Sherwood on, I can guarantee you that much. But if they go down, I wonder if Luke Williams will end up getting the sack, and I wonder if Tim Sherwood will be installed full-time as their manager. I can't see that helping them, but I, at the same time, don't see how they fix that unless they move Tim Sherwood straight into the managerial role. Yeah,
agreed. I think his official title at Swindon is Pratt. I think that's his official title at the club. If you're listening, Tim, sue me. Also, Josh, we wanted to touch a little bit on Coventry and their plight as well. It is sad, isn't it, to see a club of, I mean, what they've been through with their ground and is it Coventry Borough Council when they went to the Rico, then they were at Northampton, they went back to the Rico, and it's a proper classic football side. It's hard to believe that a club that used to have players like Darren Huckabee and Dion Dublin and Big Steve Ogrizovic back in the Premier League days, and they were a staple side. I remember going up to watch Coventry at Highfield Road against Arsenal twice, in fact, in the late 90s. And yet here they are. Realistically, they are facing relegation to League Two, unless they can get a very quick run of games. I mean, they've won the last two, which is, good signs. But it's sad, isn't it, to see a club of that size languishing as low down as they are. And a quick nod as well to the question we had from Who did we have? Let me find it. I had a question from Lee Betts at Lee AA Betts. What are your thoughts on the situations at Coventry and Leyton Orient? More to come on them in a minute. So, what do you think, Josh, about Coventry and their current plight?
Yeah, it's not been good reading for a large number of seasons, but it does look to be like there is some silver lining coming to this cloud with them. Mark Robbins has come in, and I think he is doing a good job for them. They have got, as you say, those 2 wins in a row. He's also got this international. Well, didn't have the international break, did they? I've gone. The international football has given me like a baby brain. It's still gone.
I know that feeling.
But yes, they do have things to look forward to. The government are finally starting to come in as a mediator to the whole plight and start helping them turn this round. I think so long as they're not looking at any severe points deductions for any dodgy books, then I think they do have a chance. But it is going to be very, very difficult for them to get out. They have got a trip to Wembley for the Checkatrade Trophy. I think it's the first time in 30 years since they last went there. That's against Oxford United, and they have sold 40,000 tickets for that game just in the Coventry end. So there is the love for the football. They don't get that kind of turnout for league games, but I'm sure that's fans voting with their feet. With the current situation with the Ricoh Arena, I know there are a certain group of fans that refuse to go to that stadium because of everything that's happened with it. And it is sad to see clubs like this get pulled and pushed around and abused by owners. And I'm sure there's another couple of teams that we're going to come on to when we hit League Two for ownerships and how, FA's fit and proper testing potentially isn't fit for purpose in its current guise.
It's a real shame. It's a real shame on a club like that. But as you say, that Checkatrade Trophy is at least something for those supporters to cheer about. And at the risk of upsetting any Oxford fans, it'd be nice to see them get that silverware on board. But that remains to be seen. Ross, is there any, before we look at the team of the year that's been announced, is there any other teams that you want to particularly highlight, or any moments, incidents, anything that you want to look at for League One as a whole this season?
The only one I'd look at personally is the MK Dons, who came down from the Championship last season, and I thought they were not so much unlucky, but they certainly just slipped through the trapdoor last season. I think there was other teams in there that certainly could have been relegated, but the MK Dons have been a League One staple for years now, and they've always been that nearly team that really should be playing in the Championship, but never quite made it. And this season they've come back down. And certainly the start of the season was absolutely awful for the MK Dons. They were terrible, and they were down in the relegation places. They ended up losing Carl Robinson, who is obviously now at Charlton. He's been their manager for somewhere around 4 or 5 years now. I'd have to peg it at. So they have had a really, really shocking season, and I was expecting them to pose a lot more of a challenge to the top half of the league. But their new manager, whose name escapes me, they brought him in from Hearts, I believe. He's done very well with them since he's come in, and he has not so much turned the ship around, but certainly steadied it. And I think next year they'll be in a much better position. But considering where they and AFC Wimbledon have been the past few seasons, I think it's a major, major shock to see the MK Dons currently beneath them. And certainly after the achievements of last season, they were still a very good Championship side at times. I think it's a major, major shock to see them as low down in the division as they actually are.
Yeah, fair shout. And I think it's Morecambe that you've got on the agenda, Josh, as well. That's your kind of any other business for this league.
Yeah. Sorry, I just thought Morecambe were in League Two.
They are. In League Two.
They are in League Two. Sorry. Oh, I've jumped the gun. Look at me. I've promoted them and then I've taken them back out the league. Sorry, Morecambe fans. I do apologise. Josh, is there anyone else in League One that you'd like to turn the spotlight on before we move on to that team of the year?
No, I think the piece on AFC Wimbledon was everything I wanted to cover from that.
Fair enough. So give us that team of the league then, for the team of the year so far this season for League One. Who's in it? Okay,
we'll go between the sticks. We've got Ripley from Oldham. We've then got Meredith at left back for Bradford. We've got a Bolton centre-back pairing of Beavers and Wheater, and then McLaughlin from Fleetwood at right back, and then a midfield of Fleck from Sheffield United, Oztumer from Walsall, and Morris from Scunthorpe. And then we have got Gregory up front from Millwall, alongside Billy Sharp of Sheffield United, and Vaughan from, and this is really testing my knowledge of crests, and I can't get that one.
Bury.
Cannot get. Is it from Bury? There we go. And manager of the season has gone to, I think there's no disputing this, Uwe Rosler from Fleetwood.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much a shoe-in, isn't it? That one. Anybody missing out of that, Ross, for you? Any teams? Any players from teams that you think have maybe gone a bit under the radar?
There's three that I can think of. I mean, the weakest argument I could probably make is Josh Villa for Bolton, who I think is a fantastic player and deserves to be in the Championship at the very least. I think he's been a steady hand for them this year, and it doesn't overly surprise me considering the quality of the midfielders. I mean, Fleck has been frankly the best player in League One this season, and Oztumer has been scoring some ridiculous goals. But Villa, I think, should have been in consideration, or should at least be mooted. Chris Maguire for Oxford, I think he's been absolutely fantastic for them, and he's dragged them up the league. I remember at the start of the season, Michael Appleton said that Oxford were in a relegation fight, and because of the goals contributed by Maguire and others, but Maguire specifically, have really dragged them up the league. And the one that I'm really, really surprised to see not get there, I know I'm going to sound biased here, but Jason McCarthy, who's on loan from Southampton, I think McCarthy's progress this year for Walsall has been absolutely fantastic. I hope and pray that when he comes back to Southampton, we give him a chance in the first team, because I've been banging this kid's drum for years now. I think he's going to be a future Southampton captain. But they played him at right back at Walsall, and for probably about 3-4 months he was going through this learning process, and he was doing fine in defence, but they weren't getting enough for him going forward. They changed their formation and they pushed the fullbacks up a little bit to wing backs, and ever since then he's been absolutely lethal. He's been absolutely brilliant for Walsall all season long, but especially since they made that tactical change. So I'm personally really, really surprised that Jason McCarthy's been left out, despite the fact that McLaughlin is probably the best fullback in the division. I'm really, really surprised McCarthy missed.
Fair points, yeah, fair points indeed. Anybody for you, Josh, that you wanted to mention, or you're happy with what Ross has come back with there?
There was only one, and I went for a different Bolton midfielder. I went for their Portuguese midfielder, Felipe Moraes. He has had, he's in currently an excellent run of form, and I think he is absolutely superb for them. That would be the only change, but I think with the fact that there's two Bolton players in there already, it makes it very difficult to make a case to try and put another Bolton player in there.
I think for context, Mariah, I could be off on this stat, but I think it's somewhere along the lines of he's contributed to 13 goals of Bolton's last 18. It's something like that for either assists or goals himself. It's a ridiculous run of form he's on as of late.
So it is, exactly that. So Bolton scored 18 goals in the last 7 league games, and he has provided 13 of them with 11 assists and 2 goals.
Yeah, it's one of those leagues as well, isn't it? There's a lot of players that maybe are probably going to pitch up at Championship clubs next season. I think it's maybe fair to say that, unless, of course, they go up themselves. But yeah, there's a few players that I've looked at down there and thought, yes, I think they could be playing at higher levels. So it'd be interesting to see where they end up. Right, okay, let's shift into our sort of final league of clear focus then, which is League 2, of course. Ross, would you like to start us off on League 2? Any particular stories or clubs that you'd like to focus in on?
The main one I really should is Portsmouth, not just because they're my local rival, but because there's some very big news coming out of Portsmouth. Obviously, I don't need to tell anyone about the recent takeover issues they've had since probably about 2009-ish, I think it started, with being swapped around between 3 or 4 different millionaires who all decided to try and sell off different parts of either the stadium or the area around the stadium to try and pay off their own debts. If you go down to Fratton Park these days, you'll find a giant Tesco's on what used to be their car park. The club has been through the ringer with the ownership and different bits of land being sold off. And obviously then they were bought out by their own fans, and they now have a fans trust in charge. The current story coming out of Portsmouth at the moment is that what's his name? Michael Eisner, who is associated with Disney, as you may know. He is currently looking to take over at Portsmouth Football Club. Now, aside from the fact, as a Southampton fan, I find that bloody hilarious that we can now call Portsmouth a Mickey Mouse club. The money they were going to get from this Eisner takeover is exactly what they need. And if it does come off, then Portsmouth will become a very dangerous outlet, not just for the remainder of the season, but next season, whether they're in League One or in League Two. But the takeover story obviously is taking a bit of time at Portsmouth because of the recent takeover details and some of the problems the fans have had with some of their previous owners. So it's not done yet, it's not been signed off yet, but there's certainly a lot of conversations going on, and it could be a major shake-up for Portsmouth.
Yeah, it's definitely a side to keep an eye. I suppose they are one of those sides you immediately look at and go, okay, how are they doing? Because they're one of the sides that leap off the page. Josh, what about yourself? Particularly top flight end or top end of the League Two table? Any particular stories that have jumped out at you? We saw Doncaster play Plymouth today at time of recording, and Plymouth got a 1-0 victory, which just closes that gap to 3 points now. It looks like those two are the two that are favourites to go up. Either of those two you want to talk about, or anybody else on that top end?
I was going to drop to Luton, who are managed by Nathan Jones, who was the old Brighton assistant manager from last season. And the season they're having, I think there is a good chance that they will go up. They have got a very good squad at the moment. You've got the likes of on-loan goalkeeper Matt Macey from Arsenal. Then you've got the Hilton up front, who's got 19 goals in 34 appearances. And I think they've got a strong chance in this playoffs. That if they can cement it, they have had a poor run of form of late, but I think Nathan Jones has got the resources and the skill to turn this around and look to at least challenge for the playoff spots. I think with the likes or the behemoth of Portsmouth being in there, it could be quite difficult for them, but I think they made it out of the conference. I wouldn't say they didn't deserve to go out the conference, but I think a team of that size, you'd look at them and think, well, maybe they were punching a little bit above their weight, but I think they have got everything they need to be successful in this league and League One.
Yeah, there's definitely the right setup there at the very least, isn't there? So, yeah, I would agree with that. Ross, is there anybody that's sort of middle ending, or obviously we're going to get down to the teams at the lower end, but is there any clubs down there that you look at and you think, again, much like League One, that shouldn't be as low as they are, or clubs that are massively underachieving, mid-table or below?
There's one club that's massively overachieving in Exeter City, and there's another club that are massively underachieving in Carlisle United. When they played each other last November, Exeter City were bottom of the league and Carlisle was second top. And we're now in a position with 7 games to go where Exeter City is 7th in the playoffs and Carlisle are 8th. The change in both of those sides has been so profound. Both of them have just had the most bizarre seasons from where they started. I think we documented Exeter's fall at the start of the season in the roundups and the tremendous run they went on to get up into the playoff positions. But Carlisle's has just crumbled ever since they sold Charlie Wyke in the January window. I remember asking on the pod at the time, because like 3 or 4 of these major strikers moved on the last day. Owell Bogle left Grimsby, Charlie Wyke left Carlisle, and Zach Clough left Bolton. And I remember saying, which one of these is going to have the biggest impact? Who do you think is the biggest loss? And it turns out it was Charlie Wyke. It's incredible to see how far Carlisle have fallen. I believe now they're on a run of 7 games without scoring a goal. So, I mean, Exeter and Carlisle, both incredible stories from just where they were the last time they faced each other. Actually, I think the last time they faced each other, Carlisle was still unbeaten. So this weekend, Exeter have now gone up to 7th, and Carlisle drop all the way down to 8th after some of their results. But it's bizarre to see both of them turn it around. And on one hand, I'm delighted to see Exeter City back up in a position more worthy of the squad and the manager. But I'm so surprised by Carlisle and the drop-off they've experienced. That's not to say they haven't overachieved by finishing 8th, because Keith Curle's job there has been very difficult, and he's done brilliantly with them since he's gone in there. But to go from 2nd all the way down to 8th in such a short period of time just because one player left is absolutely staggering.
Yeah, fair play. I think that's a very good point to make. And Exeter have been, we're quite big fans, aren't we, of their gaffer on this pod. So long may their rise at the table continue, as far as I'm concerned. I think that's a very good story. So, yes, absolutely. Any other business as far as we're going to focus on Leyton Orient in a second because we've got an excellent piece of information sent in to us, which I'm going to read. But anybody else you want to pick out, Josh, just before we move on to Leyton Orient?
I think this would be a good time to mention Morecambe, who, just before we get into Leyton Orient, we'll kind of build up to it because I think it's quite a difficult story to jump into. But Morecambe have also, rather under the radar, because I think they're not as well known a team as the likes of Leyton Orient, Portsmouth, Coventry. They haven't really done top flight or upper echelons of the league prior to that. Currently 19th. They're sitting, 13 points either side of them from the relegation and playoffs. So I think they're doing fairly well on the pitch anyway. But they have had problems with the staff being paid late twice this season. And there's a big court case going on at the moment. The main crux of the issue is they want to sell. There's a guy ready to buy. However, there's two people disputing the owners of the current holding company of who has the right to sell and who has the controlling power. You have got a couple of court cases that have slowly moved through. I think they're going to start getting a resolution next week, I think, is when it kicks off again. I think it's 29th or the 30th of March is when they're back in court, these two businessmen, to fight it out for who has the controlling power in this is G50 Holdings. But whilst that's been happening in January, they lost transfer of Tom Buckhausen, who went on a mutual contract. It wasn't a mutual contract termination per se, but there were certain clauses in there. I think it's basically a free because they couldn't really afford to keep his wages or pay his wages, I should say. And Jim Bentley, the manager, has just come out recently and said he's not sure if the directors or whoever negotiated the transfer out have necessarily put the club's club's thoughts and well-being at heart when they've negotiated this deal out, because he's tearing up trees now at Preston at the moment, and I think the size of the potential sell-on fee or certain clauses in there aren't as good as they could have necessarily pushed for in the case that Preston didn't necessarily have to pay a lot of money for him.
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange old deal, that, because he's been quite good, I think, hasn't he? From what I can gather since he's moved. So there's some weird old deals. What was the actual? Was the comments? Was that recently? The comments were made by the manager. Then was that quite a recent thing?
With the Buckhausen only moved in January. It was a couple of weeks ago that he made that statement that he thought that it was a little bit odd. I know it's not great for a manager to be running his mouth against the board. However, they have put the team in a lot of problems because of the fact that they can't really. They've got this argument basically going on at the top of the club for who's controlling what. And while this is all going on, there's a guy there, just hoping to get control of the club and, pour his money into it. And you've got to look at, as I said and alluded to, the fit persons
test. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it is a very, very strange one, that, isn't it? And speaking of strange, that does of course lead us on to Leyton Orient. So for anybody that doesn't know, and I'm sure you probably will know the story by now, but if you don't, Leyton Orient, a club with a sort of quite a grand old history, and they're currently sitting 32 points bottom of League Two. Now, bear with me. I'm going to read this excellent piece that was sent to us by a gentleman at North Armoury. He goes by on Twitter. So I'm going to just read this in full because it's certainly worth our time doing so. So he writes in. He says, "Hey, this might get quite wordy. but I feel this is a type of story that really deserves it regarding the whole Orient scandal. I was brought up as an Arsenal fan, but Leyton Orient have always been the local club, and I have always followed them regardless of Arsenal. The last 5 years for both clubs have been crazy, with Arsenal passing the banter era, in inverted commas, and Orient tasting the true demise of football. In 2013-14 season, Orient began the Stand Up for the Orient group, where fans below the age of 18 were given free season tickets. Although it sounded suicidal from a financial point of view, the movement worked, and the Orient crowd nearly doubled. There was a true buzz around the club. The stadium was bouncing, the club were earning money, and this was ever present on the pitch. While spending the majority of the season looking down at everyone else, we unfortunately ended up having to fight for promotion through the playoffs. While being 2-0 up at the break at Wembley in the final, it then seemed we've done it. Second promotion in just 8 years. But 80 minutes later, we began one of the worst moments in the club's history. Not only did we scupper a 2-0 lead, we also ended up losing the game in the worst possible way. I still remember the Rotherham manager wheeling down the touchline during their celebrations, with my beloved Arsenal also capitulating a 124-day run at the top of the Premier League. It was a low point. We were all distraught, but Leyton Orient are now stronger, bigger and more determined to reach the highest heights of English football than ever. With club hero and sports brand owner Barry Hearn selling the club to a so-called Italian millionaire, the fans were in fits of happiness, with the full expectancy of automatic promotion in the following season. 130 games, 8 managers and 1 relegation later, we now sit bottom of the English Football League with an all but confirmed second relegation. What went wrong? Bocetti, the current owner, launched the Leyton Orient talent show in Italy, where the winner of football challenges will be given a contract regardless of their level. No money was put into the club, so wages have been paid not been paid multiple times. Out of touch Italian managers who didn't even speak English attempted to bring in ex-Italian players to plug holes. A notable player was Andrea De Sena, once of Liverpool and Napoli fame. No manager was given the tools nor the time to make an impact. After the drop into League Two, the expected excellence of players was not met well. They resulted in many gaps not being filled with suitable players, allowed our top striker Jay Simpson, formerly of Arsenal of course, top English goal scorer of the 2015-16 season, to leave after not meeting his wage demands. So what about now? Our current team is nearly all youth prospects. Orient thankfully have a fantastic youth setup, but however, relying on these kids to save the club from relegation is bizarre. Although clearly talented, the likes of Karoma, Gavin Massey and Semedo, the guys just don't have the experience, and it's been a very difficult ride for Danny Webb. He's done a great job, and I feel he's been unfairly given stick considering the circumstances. Bocetti has failed to pay the 250k tax bill and allegedly did not have the money to pay off this bill. On the 21st of March, a court hearing adjourned the bill, allowing the club an additional few months to pay the entirety of the bill. Although Bocetti begrudgingly said he would pay the bill, the fans' trust raised over 100,000 alone to the cause, showing how amazing the support for the fans and the arriving supporters has been. If not paid, the club will be deducted 15 points in our first season of the conference, and if so, could significantly end the Orient's league dreams for years. I laugh when Arsenal fans claim Wenger is killing the club. How about you pop down to E-Town and watch how a real man destroys a club? There's of course, much more, and I didn't want to write too much too late. He says also Carpenter out. Thanks very much for that, my good man. So I want to give you both just a brief moment to talk about that particular piece of writing. Really nicely written, from the heart. Even a man who, yes, he might follow the Arsenal and he might be sort of keen on that end of things, but it's proof, isn't it? I'll come to you, Ross, first of all, that local clubs matter, don't they? You know, even if you don't necessarily follow them, it is important that you get along and you do support a local club, or you're at least in a position where you can lend your support to a club when it's in need, because this is a club that Barry Hearn honestly thought he could take to be one of London's big clubs, and now look where they are. Absolutely,
and being a fan of a club that's been in a similar position in terms of administration and almost going out of business, I can completely empathise with Leyton Orient fans. Honestly, the best thing that could happen to them right now is just a nice clean relegation to the conference and a change of ownership in the summer. Whether or not that's going to happen or not, I don't know. It's just one of those messy situations where you can't really tell if the owner would keep it on just because it's an investment he wanted to stay with, or if he'd get rid of it because it's become too much hassle. It's really difficult to know with Leyton Orient, because there's just so much confusion about everything off the field, frankly. So they are an interesting specimen. I think the idea of relying on Leyton Orient youth was put in place a little while back, and it seemed at the time to be a decent idea, but you still need to shore that up with some decent signings around them, and they didn't have that. Jay Simpson obviously leaving for, I think it's the MLS he's now gone to, is a big miss. And it's strange now to see Leyton Orient at the bottom of the division when Newport County have been, by far and away the worst team in the division for months now. So to see them now above Leyton Orient is a massive shock, and that kind of sums up Leyton Orient's season. I do remember them playing that game against Rotherham in the playoff final. It was a very good game to watch. I think Moses Odubajo got the first goal. And I remember as well Steve Evans running up and down the field, and I've never been a Steve Evans fan, so trust me, I didn't enjoy it either. But to see them go from there to where they are now is a stark difference. And like I say, as a fan of a club that's already been there, then I can fully appreciate the range of emotions that they feel at the moment.
Yeah, it's a sobering thought, isn't it? Anything you want to add to that, Josh? I mean, obviously we being sort of followers of Arsenal, we can sympathise with that chap's viewpoint, but there is, there's bigger crises at some very big clubs lower down the pyramid, and Orient are a fine example of that at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember seeing Leyton Orient at the Withdean when they're in the same league as Brighton, which would have been League One at the time, and they always had a decent squad. They always, looked like a stable club. I think I was in comparison to where I was standing in a glorified athletics stadium. But to see where they are now is certainly incredibly sad, and it's got to be a case of whether or not they can, avoid any further penalties with in terms of winding up positions or just losing points. Because, it's not going to help if if they do get lucky and manage to turn this around and, get out of the relegation zone. But it is a very, very tough for them. And it is never good to see a club like this, or any club, to be honest, have such issues that have been caused by owners coming in and just using it as a plaything. And I think in potentially other leagues that owners can do a little bit more, and although the fans would be aggrieved, they've got a bit more of a tolerance for it. I think in England it is, these clubs have been going, since the early 1900s. Leyton Orient is, founded in 1881, so there's huge number of generations back that have seen Leyton Orient go through trials and tribulations throughout the course of them existing, and to see an institution like that to not exist anymore would be absolutely farcical.
Yeah, it's a mess. It's a real mess, and all we can really do on this podcast in particular is wish them the best in trying to stave off, what seems at the moment to be the inevitable. Let's hope it doesn't end up that way. But let's come back to happier times then. Team of the season, Josh, I believe you have League Two's version there.
Yeah, no Orient players in this, unfortunately. But between the sticks, we have got Ford from Portsmouth, and then in the back line, two more Portsmouth players. At left back, we've got Stevens, centre back Burgess, and Plymouth Bradley at centre back, and Mellor from Blackpool at right back. Then the midfield, another Blackpool player in Potts. Got a Doncaster player in Coppinger, and Plymouth's Carey making up the midfield. And then Doncaster's Marquez up front, alongside, I believe, Stevenage's Godden, who has had an absolutely fantastic season from what I can recall. And Exeter City's Watkins finishing off the 11, and manager of the season is Darren Ferguson of Doncaster,
whom I never quite trust. Don't know why, he's got one of them faces, but that's just me. Any players, Ross, that you feel deserve a bit more credit, or anyone that you would maybe take out?
In terms of players, I would have to say no, mainly because the biggest hitters in League Two have been sold on, especially in January. You think of Charlie Wyke and Omar Bogle, who both should have been in that by all rights, and Bogle probably still could make it in there because of the amount of goals he's scored. He's still in like the top 5 goal scorers in League Two, and he's been gone since January. So the only change I'd make to Team of the Year is actually the manager. I would take out Darren Ferguson, who's doing kind of what was expected of him, and I'd put in Daryl Sahl, who is manager of Stevenage, who are up in 4th at the moment. If they finish in the playoffs, let alone if they go up, that's an incredible season for Stevenage. So for me, that's the only change I'd make. I'd take out Darren Ferguson and put in Sahl.
Fair enough. Anybody that you would change, Josh? Anybody that's you're not particularly happy in there, or anybody you'd like to add?
I think potentially Hilton has a case from Luton to be up front in that team, but other than that, I'm not too sure. Potentially Adams from Carlisle as well. He's got the most assists in the league. I think he is harshly done by not necessarily being in there, but with Carlisle's current form, I think that probably comes into the mind of people voting, that they almost look at recent form when it comes to deciding these teams.
Yeah, very good point. I suppose, again, it is hard, isn't it? I know when I sit down and try and do a Premier League best of 11 or a French League best of 11 or even the French starting 11 in 2 years' time, I struggled massively leaving out certain players. So I suppose it is a little bit difficult. But as we say, if there's certain teams that you don't agree with, players that you don't think get enough focus, tweet us and we'll do our best to bring them up. But okay, good. That'll do us then for our main leagues of focus. We are just going to do a little bit on the leagues below, leagues 1, 2, and Championship leagues 1 and 2, just to kind of wrap up the podcast. So, Ross, you've been doing a little bit of intel. We had our good friend Tom at 5 Star Flips. Just out of interest, would you guys be dipping into the conference in your next special? What have you? You've got a sort of a brief update for us on the conference.
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend I know as much about the conference as I do about other divisions, but certainly I know enough to get you updated on what's happening down there. Lincoln City, as you of course know from FA Cup fame, are top of the division. They've got 3 games in hand on Forest Green Rovers in second because of their FA Cup exploits. Joint on 75 points, but with the 3 games in hand, you'd fully expect them to go up. And I have a friend who is a Barrow fan, and he's seen Lincoln play. He says they're League One quality and deserve to be runaway champions. So I don't think there's much doubt about Lincoln City going up automatically. The top 4 playoff places are currently occupied by Forest Green Rovers, Tranmere Rovers, Dagenham and Redbridge, and Aldershot Town. I can tell you that Aldershot Town being in the playoffs is a massive shock because they've been in no state the past few years since they left the Football League. But you would probably expect Tranmere Rovers to go up if that ends up being the playoff positions, because Tranmere are a massive team for the conference level. Gateshead, Dover and Barrow all within an outside chance. I think Barrow have been one of the surprise packages, to be honest, from the conference this year. They went on a streak of somewhere in around 25 games unbeaten, so it's a little bit disappointing now to see them in 8th, but they have lost a bit of form since that undefeated streak broke down, but they're still in with a chance. Eastleigh, who continue to try and push for that place in the top 5 every single year, they're currently down in 11th because they've had a crazy season with managers. For the life of me, I can't think of the Barnet manager who joined them a few months back, but he was there for about a cup of tea and took them further down the league than they were in the first place, and he's been sacked and replaced now as well. So Eastleigh will probably be looking for a much better season next year. In terms of the relegation zones, you are looking at the very distinct possibility of losing Torquay United and York City, who not so long ago were both league clubs. You're looking at them now becoming relegation fodder. York City on 36 points and Torquay United on 40. To be fair to both of them, Woking are the team just outside the relegation zone. They're on 41 points, so they're not dead and buried yet, but they have been down in those positions for a long time this season, so you do fear for Torquay and York. At the bottom, unfortunately, is North Ferriby, who I have a special place in my heart for after some of their trials and tribulations the past few years, but they are currently bottom on 33, along with Southport on 34. Woking, Maidstone, Braintree and Guiseley probably still in with a shout of being relegated, but you wouldn't expect it at this point. Sutton also down there on 48 points. They're 16th, but I think at this point they're probably considering themselves safe. So that's about my extent of the knowledge of non-league. Just a brief overview on how things are doing. Like I said, I get most of my information from my friend who supports Barrow, but I can tell you for certain that Lincoln City, I'd be stunned if they don't go up as champions. From what I've seen of them, from what I've been told of them, from the position they're currently in, they seem nailed on to be the first team to get promotion in any of the leagues in England this season.
Yeah, I actually caught a bit of that game between Forest Green and Lincoln yesterday, and it was quite a good watch, actually, quite entertaining. Funny enough, I've seen a lot of people saying they'd rather watch non-league football than England after today, so I kind of concur with that, I must admit, having sat through both. I think I know which one I'd pick to watch again. So yes, there are leagues that exist below the Premier League. I know that's hard for some people to accept or understand, but it is a fact, and we try and bring you the best that we can from these specials.
One other thing I can throw into a non-league discussion.
Yes.
If you're interested in Project Salford, currently under the charge of the what they called the United 90s, whatever they were called.
Class of 92.
Class of 92, that's what it is.
That's the one. Yeah.
If you're interested in their progress, they're currently in the playoff positions. I don't think they're going to go up automatically because Fylde have that league on lockdown. Fylde have been really unlucky the past few years. They've been in the same league as Barrow, who have been very, very good in that division. Fylde look like they're going up automatically, but Salford are currently in the playoff places. They've had a bit of a wobbly patch of form, but they're still there at the moment. They could end up in the playoffs at the end of the season, so they could become a National League side next season.
Interesting, and that really would be quite the story to follow. I think it's fair to say a lot of people will be jumping on that particular bandwagon. So yeah, good clubs to follow. Right, okay. Well, I think that will do us for this special, this elongated lower league special, or EFL special, if you will. Hopefully you haven't got too bored over this international break, and hopefully this will tide you over. At time of recording, we're recording on the Sunday. We are hoping to release this in place of the normal pod on the Monday. So look out for us returning the following week, where of course we'll be back with our English breakfast. I think we've got a few games to cover in the upcoming weekend's games, Premier League and below. So we shall be back on Sunday, a week tonight, in fact, to cover those. And of course, we've got a new man on the case as well. Our good friend Joel Meloir has joined the team, so he's going to be providing Spanish expertise on the main pod, which will of course return Monday week as well. And he's also going to be providing us with a little bit of a drop-in service for the English breakfast as well, because he does follow Hull City. So that'll give us a little bit of perspective on the lower end of the Premier League table as well. So we look forward to that. Other than that, just to wrap up and say, obviously, do get yourself along to classicfootballshirts.co.uk. Have a little look at their wonderful stock. Get yourself a shirt. Let us know if you do, and we'll give you some love. And of course, you can follow us on the usual channels: SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes. They're all up there. Do give us a follow on Twitter as well at the FH Podcast. And we're trying to up our subscriptions on both YouTube and SoundCloud. So if you listen on SoundCloud in particular, give us a little heart, which just lets us know that you love us. And if you're a YouTube subscriber, just give us a thumbs up or hit that subscription button on both channels, and it lets us know where you are and that you love us. And if you're really, really bored and you really, really love us, then drop us an iTunes review, where that just helps us to get up and about the iTunes charts, and maybe gets our name a little bit further out there to do things. So okay, that will be it for tonight's podcast then. Thank you very, very much for joining us. I have to say thank you to my accomplished panel of both Josh and Ross. Many thanks to you both for this evening.
No problem.
It's a pleasure, as always.
And we, as I say, we'll be back next week. Try your best to get through the next week of international football. It's nearly over, boys and girls. We nearly get back to proper football. I didn't say that out loud, did I? I think I got away with it. So until next time, keep enjoying your lower league football and your EFL action. We've been the Football Hipsters, and we'll speak to you very soon.